everyone. Good morning. Morning. um, my name is Kate, but I go by many names to many different people. I am a nocturnal lab dweller in America's finest city, a cat mom at home, and a Discord server mom on the internet, and a person who stutters everywhere and all of the time. I found the NSA on the internet, as one does, but my method of discovery was through a social media called Discord, as Andrew mentioned. I met so many of my friends on that platform in our own stuttering community, and I did exactly what my baby boomer parents always told me not to do. I gave de facto internet strangers my real name. I got on a plane, and I flew to a hotel to meet them in person. I totally did not get my organs harvested, but unless you count leaving a piece of my heart behind every time I have to say goodbye to my NSA family for another year. I'm here today to tell you a little bit how I ended up here. So to do that, we have to go all the way back to the very beginning. We'll start when I'm 11, and I get shipped off to Eastern Virginia to attend Ross Barrett's Fluency Precision Program. I am closed in a veritable closet for several hours a day, per day, for 2 weeks, talking to myself and the wall. And I get to listen to my own recorded speech played back to me, pick out my mistakes, and practice over again. I do this over and over for days on end. And this is the first time I realized that my speech is a problem and an embarrassment to the people who are supposed to love me unconditionally. Of course, the program doesn't work, and it's all my fault. I'm 11, and I'm taught self-hatred instead of fluency. I'm 15. My mother tells me that she realized I had a stutter. She cried for days. Not because she was ashamed or disappointed, but because she was afraid. She knew I would have to argue and fight to be allowed to take up space and be heard. And she knew stuttering was genetic in her family, but she was hoping that her kids would be spared. She said it's a selfish thing to mourn and that I would be fine. And I am fine, but it sounds to me that she's convincing herself more than me. I'm 15, and I'm afraid to disappoint people I think I've already let down anyway. I'm 18, and I fail a public speaking assignment in a communications class for obvious reasons. My professor tells me he needs documentation from an SLP and a letter from my university's disabled students department to consider letting me redo my speech and give me accommodations. For the first time in my life, I am angry and embarrassed for an ironically opposite reason. What do you mean I need to provide proof? Is it not noticeable? Does everyone think I'm just like faking it for sympathy? I'm 18, and I have to navigate the infuriating landscape of higher education advocacy bureaucracy just to be able to take up space and be heard. On a lighter note, several years later, I'm 24, and my brain is a bit more online and grown up, but I have a mean case of imposter syndrome. I feel like I fell ass backwards into a set of scrubs that are too big for me. My mother was right, though. She was right about a lot of things. One of the things she was right about, as someone who also spent a career in healthcare, is that humans love to insert inanimate objects where the sun don't shine. So I already knew the ER was not a place I wanted to be. Of course, nobody should want to end up in the ER. It's not a fun place for anybody. But I'm not one of those people that thrives on chaos and can be a capable emergency medicine provider. Unfortunately, I had to give the ER my pound of flesh and shred of sanity, just like everybody else. And so one evening, I am exhausted and flustered, and I thought I had done my best to assist and follow directions, but my stutter gets much worse in times of high anxiety and stress. My friends have all heard this story. What I left out while telling this story in the past is that afterwards the ER doc chewed me out for not being able to respond to him when he prompted me for a verbal response. That he didn't know how I had gotten this far if I could not even force out the words gauze or forceps. That I'm a poor excuse for a student, and that nobody is going to take me seriously if I can't talk. And I think a lot of healthcare training is like working in food service. If you've never cried in a walk-in fridge, I can't take you seriously. And if you've never cried in a supply closet surrounded by, you guessed it, gauze and forceps, among other things, I can't take you seriously either. And I've definitely done both. For a long time, I told myself I would prove him wrong, that I could be a capable, smart provider, even if my disfluency made me appear as though I was an idiot. I made myself miserable trying to force myself to be a people person, that being openly scowled at and dismissed by patients who got frustrated with my speech didn't bother me. In retrospect, I think the most foolish thing was that I knew from fairly early on in my education that I didn't want to be a patient-facing provider anyway. I really enjoyed the lab, even as far back as undergrad, and I loved the white noise of this centrifuges in the next room over, as long as they weren't right under my nose. And the mundane methodology of creating the perfect blood smear that took me an embarrassingly long time to actually master. It's a lot harder than it looks. I loved not having to deal with patients face to face, and only bits and pieces of them that certainly didn't talk back or roll their eyes at me. But I thought that choosing to be a lab rat now was now a cop-out. It was giving in to a split-second judgment from someone who actually didn't know me at all. And so, to make a long story short and wrap up what is already way too long of a story, we'll fast forward to when I'm 26. I am meeting a doctor who is to be my new attending for the next several years. I am suddenly 11 again, and I'm 15, and I'm 18, and 24, and all the years and tiny traumas in between. I'm a child meeting their kindergarten teacher for the first time, and I still have a nasty case of imposter syndrome. The doc introduces himself to us as a totally normal, friendly human being, albeit a little weird. He's one of those doctors that can rattle off every single bone in the human body in descending alphabetical order and then anatomically correct order, because that makes sense to him. But he gets frustrated when a printer doesn't print because that doesn't make sense to him. I'm grateful for an attending that treats me with respect and kindness. There is a mutual appreciation for everyone's depth of patience and everyone's gaps in generational know-how. I am 26, and I feel like I can take a full breath between sentences for the first time in forever. Now I am 30. I report to this same attending who is delightfully and unapologetically peculiar. He asks me about the conference every year when I come back to work. I tell him about all my friends, my NSA family, and I have to show him pictures on my iPad because he says he's too old to squint at a tiny iPhone. I tell him about Tammy and how I think I cry about as much as she does, but I'm not brave enough to spend as much time on stage as she does, so nobody can tell. I tell him about Mr. Steven, who is the cheerleader backbone of the NSA nation. I talk so much about my Discord crew and our new adoptees every year that I inevitably get interrupted by a buzzing centrifuge. I laugh so hard trying to tell some of my stories that I straight up can't talk anymore, and he tells me to go do my job and tell him the rest later. I'm 30 now. For most of my life, I loathed the way I talked and sounded to other people, and I still do sometimes. I still have terrible speech days and days where everything goes wrong. But every time I check in with my Discord friends who are now real life friends, or a photo from a past conference pops up on my digital photo frame, I'm reminded that I'm not alone. I am weirdly thankful that I am a person who stutters. And I know that love is real because when I'm with my friends, it is all around me. And my home is wherever I am with my friends who talk just like me. Thank you.